Man, we get to dive in. See, I feel like this for me is like, if we had Bob Gibson on for you, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what it's like from as a play-by-play man. When you get to talk with Joe Buck, it's a very special experience. And Joe's been great to me throughout my career as well. So, Joe, thank you for being the kind of guest that can, make me nervous on the microphone and for giving us this time, man.
No, I'm honored. I mean, it was a joy to cover CC throughout all those years and getting to know him a little bit better after the fact and being out in Tahoe and hitting balls next to him at the celebrity golf tournament. And Ryan, I've known you since, you were kind of learning the ropes, and it's been a fast ascent for you. And so I'm proud of you and all that you're doing. And it's good to catch up. It's good to see both your faces as we're talking here in the month of February.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was the soundtrack to all of my postseason, especially with the Yankees. And today they had that the 09 championship on MLB Network. And they had Derek's 3,000 hit. But before that, it was listening to you call that last out and like just reliving that was crazy, man. So I got a chance to hear it this morning too.
My career has been, first of all, I mean, for those who don't know, my dad Jack Buck broadcast for 50 years for the Cardinals and other places, CBS and NBC for a while, and did Monday Night Football and whatever. And so I got a great crash course and kind of a master's class as a kid growing up in this business. And it's been a really fun ride for me. It's weird now to be 52. I still think of myself as the young guy when I was doing my first World Series in the Bronx at 27 years old, freaked out of my mind, hoping that I could handle the big stage like that. And, I'm sitting with my gigantic head in front of a bunch of Emmys, and without the Yankees and their success over those years, and here's old Yankee Stadium there behind my desk.
Yeah.
I don't know. My career would have been totally different. I just think when you get a chance to be even the national guy calling the Yankees in the World Series and being around that, especially old Yankee Stadium, it was just a joy. And, I owe a lot to that organization. I could talk for hours about what Joe Torre means to me, which was it all coincided. Torre gets there, Jeter, Fox gets the rights to cover MLB. And then they allow me to do it with Tim McCarver, and it's just been kind of fast and furious ever since.
You know what's funny about that, Joe? As you describe that, it reminds me of what it's like when you're on the local broadcast and the team you're calling the game for plays great or they play horrible, right? And it shapes the experience for the viewer where they're like, man, you had a great broadcast. Like nobody comes up to you and says that after you do a Yankees game as a Yankees announcer when they lose 10-1. Nobody's like, yeah, that was a great broadcast. But it's true, right? Like, to a certain degree, no matter how good you are technically or I am or you nail a moment, you're at the behest of the action in front of you. So if you get those memorable things, yes, you have to be on it to nail it, but there's an appreciation for what's happening in front of you, allowing the creative space to have those memorable moments.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You're only as good as the game that you're calling, and nobody really cares about the announcer. I think, that's what one of my dad's long-held lines was, if you get hit by a bus going into the stadium, they're still going to play the game. They're not going to stop it. And maybe there's a moment of silence. Maybe there isn't for you as the announcer, but nobody's tuning in the game going, oh, man, I want to hear Joe Buck broadcast. I want to watch the Yankees. I want to watch the Red Sox. Whoever your team is. And so when you do local baseball, it's such a different experience than the national baseball because locally, and I did it for the Cardinals for 15 years or something, you see everything through the Cardinals lens. Mm-hmm. And for every play, you can go, the pitcher made a great pitch or the hitter just missed a ball that they should hit into the upper deck. And you're always making decisions which way to go. Well, when you're doing the local broadcast, it's all through one side. And so when I show up in October, everybody's like, why do you hate the Yankees? And I don't know what we can or can't say on this podcast.
You can say anything you want, Joe. You can
why do you hate the Yankees, you fucking asshole? And I'm like, look, I don't hate the Yankees. It's the opposite of that, actually. life is good when the Yankees are good for us as a network. And I'm kind of always guarded against being too open about that. But when fans hear games their way and they know the announcer, it feels the same way they do. And then they hear the national guy, and now the Red Sox guy hits a home run, and I have to get excited for them. They're like, well, this guy hates my team. So I've done it long enough now where I've pissed off every fan base that's out there. And you just kind of either put up with it and know that it's almost not even personal, or you just don't do it. So, that's just kind of the way it goes. Doing local baseball and along those lines is a lot more fun than being the down the middle national guy, because you don't ever really get to root. You're just doing the action and you go on to the next game.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, Joe, because obviously one of the things I was like, we have to mockingly bring up how Joe Buck hates the Yankees so that you can dispel it for our audience. Because I can't tell you how many, and you know this, so it's not like I'm bringing up something you don't know. How many people who otherwise in their lives I consider to be reasonable and logical, who will like say flatly to me at some time because they know what a big fan I am of yours and your work, and they'll be like, "Who's your favorite play-by-play guys?" I'm like, "Well, Joe Buck," and yeah, but Joe Buck hates the Yankees. I'm like, Joe Buck doesn't hate the Yankees. Joe Buck doesn't hate any team. He wants to do a good broadcast and have a good game. I promise you.
That means that the Yankees suck. Then, during that stretch, that means that the Yankee fans are mad about how they played.
Yeah.
So then now Joe Buck sucks. That's all that
right.
is.
Well,
so it reverts back to the action. Like
it's kill the messenger. And I'm the guy that just was screaming and yelling, telling you that your team lost. Instead of, when you do local baseball, and it's funny. I mean, of all the fan bases, and I joke around with the Yankee fans and about this, and Boston's the same way. When I do Boston and the Yankees, each fan base think that I hate their team and I love the other team. So ask a Red Sox fan. They go, "Are you kidding me? That guy loves the Yankees. He hates the Red Sox. So, you just have to deal with that. But it's funny because you go through these different postseason series, and they have a certain rhythm to them, and a rise and a fall. And you just try to pick your spot, make your calls, and like you said, Ryan, these are reasonable people that just are making these comments. Like, no, maybe you're the one that's a little bit biased, not the guy calling. It's why I did this thing for Funny or Die, where I did a 5-minute video for the website Funny or Die, and I was going around different places in New York, and people were throwing stuff at me, and some nice little curator at a museum was like, I'm interviewing her, and she, says, "Fuck you for hating the Yankees." And I just, all you can do is laugh at it. And then at some point, I won't be doing it, and I'll miss the days when Yankee fans are like, "Hey," but Yankee fans they'll say that to you, but then they'll buy you a drink. They'll give you shit. But then they'll pat you on the back. Well, you do a good job. You do a good job. Come on, let's see. But in San Francisco, totally different experience. They say it and they mean it. And I've been at games at whatever they call their stadium now.
I know,
it's
changed so much.
It's changed 100 times.
Yeah,
and it's not Candlestick. I know that. And I'm waiting. 15 minutes after the game, and there's a little kid down in front of the booth, and he's with his dad. He's like, Joe. And I'm like, I don't know. All right. So finally the kid said it enough times. I look over the little railing in front of our booth, and both the little kid and his dad give me the finger. I'm like, what a beautiful father-son moment for these two. They just gave Joe Buck the finger because they think I hate the Giants. And yet, if you go back to see the last out of 2009, whatever I said, the Yankees are back on top, or champions of baseball, and I'm screaming and yelling, and then Phillies fans thought that I hated the Phillies. So it's just a never-ending battle.
Do you interact on social media? Like, do you read any of that stuff, any of the mentions and stuff on social media, Joe? Because that's obviously changed the game. And C and I talk about this a lot, but it's a completely different vessel that people have to interact with you, and for you to potentially hear or see their initial reactions and emotional reactions to things.
I do every once in a while. I mean, if I want to be really depressed, I'll go on there like after a big World Series game, and it's just like, why am I even looking at this? Because I wish I could say, oh, I don't care. You know what? I think the only person that truly doesn't care is Barkley. I think Charles Barkley legitimately doesn't care. I don't know anybody else that reads that like you're the Antichrist because you hate my team, and that doesn't affect them. In some, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So I just kind of, I'll wade in there every once in a while, or I'll just do a game, let it sit there, let the mentions kind of dissipate, maybe put something up and let it kind of refresh itself, and all that other stuff gets buried. But it's changed, the experience. I think for the announcer, it's changed the experience for the fan. When my dad was doing it all those years, he was getting handwritten letters. I remember him opening up letters it was like a ransom note with letters from a magazine like pasted together. I hate you. You suck. Crazy. Like from racist lunatics and whatever. And you can't, at some point, somebody said it great, that had written an article for the New York Times. He said, I'm going to write the article. It was an op-ed piece, but I'm not going to I'll do it if you don't allow comments. And his line was, why would I care or let somebody have access to me after I put my hard work into something that I wouldn't let in my front door? Mm-hmm. And there's some truth to that. Like at some point you have to kind of break away from that, do your job, don't worry about it. And it's just noise, and you just kind of let it live over off to the side.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you enjoy more? Is it baseball or football?
Well, I think baseball for me, because there's so much more strategy. There's so much, for the play-by-play guy to do. A guy can foul off 5 pitches. There's a pace to it. Sometimes it's terribly long, and there's a happy medium in there somewhere. But football, it's huge. So you can't discount the fact that, we did an NFC championship game last Sunday, and there were 50 million people tuning in. That just doesn't happen in anything. Like presidential debates, the Oscars, whatever. There's never are you talking to 50 million people, and then you do a Super Bowl and you're doing it for 110 million people. And it's just kind of mind-blowing. So there's that. But it's just kind of play happens for me. Who made the catch? Who made the tackle? How many yards? Troy talks. We're up against the play clock. Okay, snap. Who made the catch? Who made the tackle? How many yards? Troy talks. And baseball just has the way of allowing for a little more interaction, a little more breath. You don't have to talk throughout the whole thing. So I enjoy doing baseball more in game, but football is just a behemoth right now. So it's just a totally different thing.
Joe, did you ever do basketball, or were you ever tempted to get into basketball as you were, ascending both in baseball and football in these professional leagues?
Yeah, I did a ton of college basketball, did Missouri Tigers basketball for a handful of years, did the Missouri Valley Conference Game of the Week. And it's good for your mind, First of all, you're right there, you're on the floor. So, and they're going back and forth right in front of your face. So you don't ever have to strain to see anybody. They can land in your lap. That's not going to happen in baseball or football. So it's nice to kind of be down by the action. I don't necessarily miss it. I think the college game obviously has changed a lot since I was doing that back in the late 80s, early 90s compared to what is going on now. And the NBA, I live in St. Louis, so I'm 52. So by the time I was aware, there really was no professional basketball to speak of here. So it's not something I grew up with. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think about it a lot. I'm not a huge fan. I'm kind of more of a hockey fan, and I'm not smart enough to do it because it's too fast and the names are too long. But I love the intensity of hockey, and that's kind of the one sport and the one team, the St. Louis Blues, that I can root for openly. And if people go, "Oh, you love the Blues, you hate my team," I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, I do, and your team sucks."
There you go. Yeah.
Your team sucks.
But they won the cup, 3 years ago, and as a fan, it was one of the great experiences of my life. I mean, living and dying, end-to-end action. But on the other side of it, you also get another taste of what fans, get mad at me for, because I'm watching Doc Emmerich, I'm watching Kenny Albert, Kenny's a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
But you want your local guys kind of doing it when it matters the most. Those are the guys you've listened to all year, and now you've got somebody that's kind of splitting it down the middle. I'm like, all right, I get it even more now, because I was guilty of kind of wanting my own guys doing it instead of the national guys.
Joe, do you have a favorite call throughout your career? If there was one where you're like that, I mean, you've had a million moments, and obviously there could be some nuance in what really strikes you, but is there one call above all else that you're like, yeah, that would be my golden one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think about it a lot. I do know that there are a few that stand out to me. The Yankees winning in '96, because that was my first time on the big stage. And Joe Torre, who I mentioned him earlier, he was, he's a Cardinal. So he was really close with my dad. And when he was a player, he used to come to our house when I was 4 years old and play poker with my dad in his game.
Awesome.
And I would sit on his lap and my dad's lap, and I'd be throwing their chips in and whatever. And now I'm doing the World Series, and Joe Torre is the manager of the Yankees, and my dad was alive then. And so making that call of them winning it and kind of the return to glory for that great franchise, and my dad being there watching it at home in St. Louis on television is probably number one for me. Charlie Hayes made the catch in foul territory to end Game 6, and that was it. So that's kind of number one. But Stephon Diggs with a touchdown in a divisional playoff game a few years ago, kind of a walk-off touchdown, was one. Plaxico Burress of the Giants in that fourth quarter of that Super Bowl 42, is one. And then I'm really proud of the Mark McGwire 60-second home run, which was record-breaking. And we're all more aware of what was going on. It still doesn't taint the memory of that for me. So, Fox preempted all their primetime programming to play that, to show that game to a national audience, and it was Cardinals-Cubs, and he ends up hitting the home run. And I was close with Mark, and I sat down with Mark and Sammy before that game, about 2 hours before that game, maybe a little more. And Sammy, when we finished with the interview, Sammy walked out. I walked out. Mark was behind me, and he grabbed me by the arm, and he said, "You better be ready, big boy. I'm hitting it tonight." And I was like, it gave me chills, and then he friggin' did it. And, it was just one of those home runs. He hit 500-foot home runs every night. And it was one of these hooking line drives that barely was fair and barely got over the wall. And, Ryan, when you're doing a game and it has huge significance, your concentration kind of goes to a different level. And I feel like I could see the spin of the ball going over the wall when he hit it. And, choking that out was fun to do too.
Those are some great ones. It's funny because there's a lot of ones I can think of that stand out to me. Joe is someone who loves the craft and watching you for so long. But I'll tell you a funny story. So one of my favorites from that 96 World Series is your Leyritz call with back at the track at the wall, we are tied, when he hits the 3-run homer off of Wohlers. And I am in college then, years after. I was 9 during the 96 World Series. I was then 19 at Fordham, so 10 years later, and I'm doing baseball for the first time. And at that time, our basketball and football was on radio, but our baseball was just on the internet, on WFUV.org. And it's the first baseball game I'm doing, and the Rams, Fordham, is down 3. And this guy hits a long fly ball to deep left field. And I go, whoever the left fielder was, Martinez, back to the track, to the wall, we are tied, right? I call it trying to mimic your cadence in this random ass Fordham baseball game, okay? And my mentor, who I don't know if you came across Bob Aarons at all ever, Joe, who ran WFUV Sports for so many years, but I don't know. I don't think so. He's in his 80s now, but he was like Spiro Ditas' mentor and Tony Reale's and mine as well. And he's the one who really taught me play-by-play. And he has he's very strict with his mannerisms and his sort of like interesting sing-songy way he talks. And as soon as I'm done, he just is looking at me. And he was always hard to get a compliment out of as well. And he's like, Ryan, you can't fucking do that. And I was like, and I was like, what do you mean I can't do that? And he's like, you said the call exactly as Joe Buck said it. That's a forever call. You can't do it. It's done.
Oh my God. I'm guilty of doing it for my dad. I mean,
it's a little different when it's your dad, though.
When David Freese hits a home run in Game 6 of 2011, and I said the same thing. We'll see you tomorrow night. And I did it. It was almost 20 years to the day that he had said it with the Braves and the Twins when Kirby Puckett hit it in Game 6 to force a Game 7. And so I said it. I don't know why I was thinking of it, but I don't know if somebody had said something to me before the game that night, like, hey, it was almost 20 years to this day that Kirby Puckett hit that home run. So it was bouncing around in the back of my mind. And then when it happened, I said it, and I tried to do what you just said. Do it, not only just say the same words, but use the same cadence. And, at that point, would have made your mentor happy. I said, I'm not going to be a Jack Buck cover band the rest of my life. I'm going to retire, because I'd kind of used variations on it in years past, and I was like, that's enough. So I was glad I did it. It fit, but that's the last time I'll ever do it.
It was special.
But you have
though.
my blessing.
Okay,
you can take any one of mine. You can take them all. I don't care. They're all yours.
Oh, thank you, Joe. That was special, though, because it was your dad. And, it's so cool hearing how, often and organically, and it makes sense, obviously, but you reference your father in the way kind of he's with you in the booth, right? How many things you take from him. I'm wondering, Joe, like when you think about you in the booth doing a game, are there one or two foundational things that you recognize regularly that come from your dad?
I think everything I do, but it starts even before that. It starts, when you get in the stadium and how you treat people, and, the smiles you give, and calling people by their name, and caring, to know something about people that you see day in and day out. I saw that as a little kid, and I there were times, because it was a different era where, there were no cell phones. My dad'd be gone on road trips for 2 weeks, and we'd finally get him home, and we'd be at dinner, and somebody would come up and be like, "Oh, Mr. Buck, I met you in Paducah at a speech you get." "Oh yeah, hey there, Fred, sit on down." I'm like, "Oh my God, now we're spending dinner with Fred." So he was just a kind of a really great people person, but it was, don't make it about you, and enjoy it. And the minute you start bitching and moaning about it, pull some money out of your pocket and put it under your microphone, because you're there. It's your job, and nobody cares if the announcer's hot. Nobody at home cares if they're cold, if they played golf that day. It's not about you. It's about the beauty of what CC did for a long time. And I think people have asked me, what's your favorite call that your dad made? And it's one that you already referenced, the man. It's kind of funny that I'm even going back to it now that I think about it, but it was Bob Gibson, a no-hitter that he pitched. My dad loved Bob Gibson. He was, just as a person, because they were great friends. My dad had so much admiration for him, and he's calling a no-hitter, and it's the last pitch, and you can hear my dad's voice crack because he's getting emotional about it. And he just loved people. He loved the game. And even when he was at his sickest, he had Parkinson's, and he had a pacemaker in his heart. He had diabetes. He had lung cancer. He had all this other stuff, and he was dealing with all that. But come 3:30, he was in his car driving downtown, and nothing made him happier than being around the team and being in the players' lounge. And players loved having him there, and he held court. And he'd get his little insulin injection by the Cardinals trainer, and then he'd keep eating his peanut butter and jelly, and they just loved having him around. So I'm so lucky that I was born into the situation I was born into, because I just saw a dad who loved going to work every day, and would rather go to work than be off. And that, he and I were close, so it was naturally what I wanted to do. I wanted to pitch. I tried to walk on at Indiana. I was not even anywhere close to being good enough. And after that dream died, day one of walk-on time, I was like, all right, this is it. I know what I want to do. And I was broadcasting AAA baseball 2 years later, and doing the Cardinals 3 years after that.
That sounds like I got a chance to be around Bob Uecker in Milwaukee every day, and just watching him, the way he interact with everybody in the stadium, and he owned that place. Like, and we wanted to be around him. Like, you know what I'm saying? He came into the lunchroom and his table was full every day, telling stories, taking guys out fishing. Like, he was more a part of the team than we were. Like, he was the brewer, you know what I'm saying? And we were just there to kind of fill in for him.
He was the constant, you know? Yeah. He was the constant. He can go back. He could go back and tell you what Robin Yount was like in that same room that you were sitting in. And my dad could go back and tell you what Stan Musial was like. He could tell you what Bob Gibson and Lou Brock were like. He could tell you what Albert Pujols was like. He just bridged generations. And that's such a great comparison. And every time I see Uke, I think of my dad, and he'll tell me a story about my dad, but that was the same. So you know what I'm talking about. They're just certain guys that you know, there are only a few people that have their statue as a broadcaster outside of a baseball stadium. My dad has one, Harry has one, I'm sure Uke has one, but it's, you know, it was more than just calling balls and strikes on radio or television. It was just always representing the team, going to breakfasts and lunches and speaking and raising money and doing things the right way and just being a good person. So that's a great comparison. And I see a lot of similarities between the two. They're both hilariously funny too.
Hey, Joe, you referenced Joe Torre a couple times. And one of the things I talk about with C is that one of my favorite parts of doing the national games that I do is the meetings we get to have with coaches. You know, I mean, to me, the 15 minutes I get to sit down with Greg Popovich before the start of a game, that is, you know, absolutely priceless. And there are a lot of guys who you feel that way about, you know, when you're doing that. I mean, obviously it's helpful for the broadcast, but it just makes you feel like you're part of the fraternity, and it's so special. I'm wondering, through the years, is there like a top 2 or 3 all time for who is best in those coaches meetings, who you talk to, baseball and football? Like, are there guys who just like, you know, you go in there, you're getting great stuff, you're getting stories, you're being captivated, you feel like maybe you're playing poker with your dad, right? Like you're part of the crew.
Yeah, well, Torrey definitely, and sitting in there when Don Zimmer was there was just a blast. And hearing them just talk, and then Tim would be a part of it. I didn't say anything. I just sat in the corner of the room and listened. But, you know, Don Zimmer saying, I'll tell you why these guys can't run the bases. Because everything else in the game is called from the bench. Every pitch is called from the bench. Pitch outs are called from the bench. The defensive positioning is called from the bench. These guys are so reliant. They're all looking in the dugout for help. The one time they're kind of on their own is going from first to third until they pick up the third base coach, and nobody can run the bases. I was like, wow. I've never thought of it that way, but that's a great point. Whitey Herzog was that way. I remember my dad when Whitey had been there for 10 years, and I don't know what, I was 18, 19 years old, and I walked in with my dad, and my dad turned on his little recorder, and they were doing their pregame interview, and my dad said, well, Whitey, it's been a great 10 years, and he went every year from the minute he got there through each season, just off the top of his head, different dates when they got players, you know, guys that came up in September that made a difference, when the division went from they were 2 up to 2 down. It was just, the guy was a savant. But as you know, the football side, Belichick is exactly like you think. He gives you absolutely nothing.
Even to you guys, he gives you nothing. Even
to us, to the point where at one point it was like, why are we even doing this? You know, at the height, it was like, is Brady playing this week? It's like, yeah, well, you know, we're going to take this one day at a time. I was like, Jesus, all right. Well, let's go. Like, this is, and then since then, he's kind of warmed up. You know, I think more of players that will kind of open up. And the 2 quarterbacks that we've had in Green Bay, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, I think some of these guys kind of look at it like therapy. They get in there. You know, I'm sitting there with Troy Aikman, and they just want to vent sometimes. And they know that they can do it in a way that's not going to burn them. And they'll tell us stuff that if we just turned around and repeated what they said, I mean, it would not be good for their careers, but they trust us with it. So, I think about guys like that. Joe Madden was always somebody that I enjoyed talking to, and he always had an answer for everything, but he also listened and was curious. I think the guys that are, they've got every answer are the ones that are a little bit annoying. Which maybe you think, well, was La Russa that way? And he really wasn't to me. I spent a long time with Tony, different guy, no doubt. But he had a big heart. I saw how he treated my mom after my dad died. He always still included my mom in all the kind of the gatherings that they would have, dinners, and he has another layer to him that I don't think a lot of people get to see. But you could go. I could give you example after example. Everybody's been good. I think eventually, guys, if they're not good at that stuff, just get weeded out. So most guys are really fun to talk to.
But the way like you mentioned the quarterbacks in Green Bay, but the way Fox has like covered the NFL, I just feel like I've grown up like watching the broadcast, whether it was Madden or you or whoever, but all of the behind the scenes interviews and the way that you guys have covered it, you guys have made football huge. You know what I'm saying? Like you guys have made generation of football fans by the way you guys have covered the game. Just so you mentioned those two quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit the last few years because Fox has kind of gotten into the opinion-based shows, but I feel like at least at Fox, we try to build players up. We're not there tearing them down and making comments about what players can't do or what is the perception is they can't do. I mean, you guys are all so talented that unless you've played and you're Aikman and you've won 3 Super Bowls, well, then you can say whatever you want. You've been there, you've done it, you've won, you know what it takes. I don't. I'm not going to sit there and shoot arrows at anybody. But I feel like through all of this since '94, when I was sitting there as a 25-year-old, what the hell am I doing about to cover an NFL game? And I'd never done the NFL. When Fox bought the rights to cover the NFC, our mission was always to kind of go under the helmet, teach people who was under there, show you the good in them, and celebrate why these guys are people that you want to root for. And that's kind of been our mission statement since the beginning, and I hope that never changes.
That's the way it should be. And it's funny what you say about the opinion-based shows, Joe, because I've run into times in the NBA where there are guys who all of a sudden don't want to talk to the broadcast crews, even though they may have some familiarity with our own professionalism and have some level of trust, but they've seen other things on the network and they're like, hey, I'm done. Like I'm not gonna go this step.
And it's hard to blame them.
I agree.
I would be the same way, I think, or I would be protective of those around me, or if my best friend is our starting center or whatever, and everybody's tearing him to shreds, it's like, okay, well, you can't have it both ways. What do you want? You want us to be helpful and give you the behind the scenes? You want us to tell you what's going on with this team, or you just want to tear us to shreds? That stuff drives me nuts. And if you reverse it, or for me, we talked about the online stuff and social media. I don't like it. I don't like people saying stuff about me. And so I try not to do that about anybody else. And, I just think a lot of people have lost perspective as to how hard these games are and how good these players are at all these different professional sports, whether it's MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL. I mean, come on. Some guy in a suit doesn't know what that takes. And we can all have an opinion, but when it gets personal and it gets, repetitive and just it feels agenda driven, I don't like any of that stuff.
I mean, even players too. We forget how hard it is. I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching whoever pitch. I'm like, just throw the ball over the plate. Like, right. I'm doing the same thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
no.
We forget too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay. So the pitching coach comes out and, we need you to throw strikes. Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's what I forgot. Right. We're trying to throw strikes today. So, it's not like they're trying to not be good. So, I think you have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but we've just, as a society, everybody's so nasty and divided and just, I hope at some point somebody puts a pin in this balloon and it pops, but it's just kind of scary where we're headed.
Well, and the interesting thing about it, Joe, not to get into not to go too far in the weeds when it comes to like tech and stuff like that, but it's not actually like those in-person interactions, right? For the most part, like even you talking about like a Yankee fan going up to you and being like, you hate my team, but then like, oh, I want to buy you a beer. Like, most of the interactions and hate and whatever in these mediums that we consume would be more like that in person, but
no doubt
we're on these platforms that literally make their money by up-regulating content that is meant to divide you and is meant to inflame. And, nuances is actually algorithmically suppressed, right? And so now, because we also don't have some level of tech literacy that's like taught or baseline, like everybody just gets consumed in their world, and it's hard. It becomes depressing, man, when you see the way people talk to each other, but it's not like real talking, but it feels that way.
That's exactly right. And I do believe that people are a hell of a lot better than we are represented on social media, because it just brings out the nastiness, and it's easy to be mad for a second and shoot off some horrific text at somebody or social media thing, and you suck, and because you're pissed off or whatever it is. And that same person would be cowering in the corner if that person walked in the room, and they'd be like, "Can I get a picture with you? And you sign this for my kids?" So people are a lot better than we're all represented. I think, at least, I hope, on social media.
Absolutely.
All right, I got to ask you this, because we know, everybody here knows the performance high of being involved in sports. See, you know it on a level Joe and I never will, what it's like to actually, be out there on the field as you're contributing to a championship. Joe, you and I know, like almost like a stage actor knows it when they get done with a play, right? Like there's a broadcast high that comes from performing, and when you have a great game, you feel like you nail a call afterwards, right? You want to grab a drink with your crew and celebrate or whatever. I'm wondering, is there for you any, like, with something you can share, is there any like most memorable post-broadcast night, like whether it's like you ended up, you're getting drinks with Eddie Vedder, whatever it is there anything like...
That's actually it in Chicago. It's so funny. I mean, he's such a dorky baseball fan in the best possible way. I mean, he's exactly as you hope he would be, one of the nicest people I've met, and another guy who's nice to everybody around him. And so all those games in Chicago, for that stretch there, going across to Murphy's bleachers and being upstairs in the little apartment up there and just being there till like 3 or 4 in the morning. And at one point he had a guitar out and there was a little group of people, but he didn't want to sing. So I was singing, and I was like, how pissed are you right now that I'm singing and he's just standing here? And I mean, it was just so fun. And, it was fun. It was funny. I was walking over one time and 2 guys were talking about me, but I'll put a hat on and I take a lot of times if it's game 3 of 3, 4, 5 in a city, I'll just leave my sport coat in the booth, put a hat on, throw a sweatshirt on or whatever it is. And I kind of put my head down and I get out of there so somebody doesn't throw something at me. And I'm walking behind 2 guys and they're like, yeah, and then Buck said this, fuck that guy. And I'm literally, I'm right behind him. And finally, as I'm just about to kind of turn to go where I'm going, I tapped the guy on the shoulder. I went, hey. And he went, hey. And then I just walked over, and the guy was just like left stunned that I was literally listening to him shred me as we were both walking across the street. And it was funny and it was ironic, and then going over there and hanging out. There's a lot of that, but I think for the most part, I tend to kind of stay to myself, and it drives my wife nuts. My wife, Michelle, works for ESPN. She does the Monday Night Football interview, like the personality profile every Monday night. And she'll come on the road with me and she's like, all right, well, we're in New York. What do you typically do in New York? I'm like, I it's Friday, so I get room service and watch the game, and then I go do the game on Saturday, and I get the hell out of there, and I come home, and I'm kind of a loner when I get right down to it. I'd rather just kind of be by myself, and I love people, but I think sometimes after games, I just kind of want to, read something that has nothing to do with sports, try to get into a good book and go to sleep and start it over the next day. I'm certainly not as wild as my dad was back in his heyday back in the 60s.
I hear you, man. I think there is something nice too about I'm a big after the game I like grabbing a drink like with my crew or whatever, but I love some of my favorite days are when I'm just like getting room service and prepping and I'm not seeing anybody. And I'm just you're hunkered down, you're just like in your zone and that's it. You don't have to do anything else.
There's value in that. And I think sometimes you need that just to kind of clear your head or just be quiet. There's nothing wrong with being quiet. It's like the days you pitch, CC. I'm sure, those are that's the beauty of being a starter, but when it's time to stay away from daddy or it's time to stay away, your family does. It's like that. Those are special days. And if you're getting ready for a Super Bowl or you're getting ready for a Game 7 for me, or really in the month of October, it's just kind of, I try to tackle what's immediately in front of me and get it behind me and then go to the next day and try to prepare for that the best I can. But I think having a little alone time leads to a better mindset for me instead of being scattered and running all over the place.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, before we let you go, I got to ask you Super Bowl thoughts. You've seen this league all season. You just had the NFC Championship game. Any real strong conviction for what happens in LA?
Yeah, I haven't seen Cincinnati since early in the year, but the way these postseason games have gone, for whatever reason, even what looks like it's going to be a blowout has ended up close. So I would say the Rams should win, but I would do well. And thank God I don't have the gambling gene that my dad had. Somehow that skipped me. But if you bet the underdogs in all of these games, I would imagine you're probably sitting pretty good right now. So I would say Rams should win, but I would take Cincinnati in the points.
Yeah,
I like it, Joe. Well, before we let you go, while you're on the line with us, like you're an FAN caller or something. But while you're on with us, Joe, before we let you go,
I have a trade proposal. I want to see Gleyber Torres and Severino packaged. Okay. Yeah.
For Trout, of course.
Yeah, for Mike Trout and the ghost of Albert Pujols.
Great. Maybe throw Ohtani in.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that without embarrassing you or and I can save some of it for the intro, but see, I don't know if I've ever told you, but I do want to say, well, Joe's here. Joe was incredibly helpful to me, and just he was an unbelievably kind mentor right away when I was 21. And there's a couple tangible things that he taught me that I've always thought of in the aftermath. So Joe let me come to the booth at Shea Stadium and sit in the booth with him and Tim McCarver doing a game and observe. And two of the things that I learned that day, in addition to things I'm sure I just absorbed via osmosis, I didn't learn, obviously, how to keep my camera straight, guys, but,
that's okay.
It's a different technological time. Joe, you told me, I was talking about the difference between TV and radio with you and asking you about it. And it was, at that time, I'd really only done radio play-by-play. And you taught me about how on TV it was important to set the anticipation with your voice rather than just always saying exactly what you're seeing. Whereas on radio, it's harder to do that because you have to say everything you're seeing. And you use the example of a ground ball in the hole with Reyes. You're like, so instead of saying Jose Reyes, backhands on the outfield grass, the long throw, you could say instead, Reyes has a cannon, Gardner can really run. And you use that as a tangible example for me. And I still think about that to this day and try and duplicate it in other ways because it's true, right? That's how TV's different in that you can set the anticipation. And it really, I think, it changes the experience for the fan at home. It gives them something to feel excited about. And so these are really tangible things, but I still think of them to this day. And then the other thing was I asked you about national games and how you get prepared to try and feel like you've been watching this team the whole season, even though obviously it would be impossible to watch every team the entire season. And you said you get the newspaper clips for the week leading up to your game, every week. So you have a finger on the pulse of what, those local papers are talking about with that team. And to this day, for my games, I always get the clippings for, the 4, 5, 6 days before I do those games for my national games. And I can't tell you, but how helpful it is. So beyond just the confidence you imbibed in me, which I appreciate, and just the fact that I felt like, oh, Joe Buck's on my side, which meant a lot. Those are two really tangible ways that still positively impact me. And so I want to say thank you for taking the time to impart that advice.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I still do both those things. And I don't know that there's any two things more important for what we do. And I think television, radio baseball, if you can do radio baseball, you can do anything, I think. Mm-hmm. But TV baseball is different. It's almost redundant. Like, you don't need to say CC Sabathia winds and fires a 2-2 pitch. People are seeing that. So it's okay to not talk. It's okay to just let it. And if he's dealing, and, it's different than if you're doing, college baseball or whatever on TV. Our mics are so good. If you can hear the pop of the mitt, or, you can hear that natural sound, there's nothing better, I don't think, for a fan at home and to hear that, that just pop of the mitt. And that's when it's exciting to me. And it just, to me, it becomes lazy. Like, you need to do the cliff notes of broadcasting. Jeter's got a long throw to make. That's all you need to say. You don't need to say ground ball, Jeter to his right, picks it up with a backhand, throws across his body, and he got him by a step. People are seeing all that. You just, as you pointed out, you just kind of set it up and see if the play's made. And yeah, there's so much coverage now that by the time you get to these games, there's not a whole hell of a lot that hasn't been said already. And now you're doing the next game. So all that stuff is good background, but being able to go into a game and be prepared and just watch the game unfold and take it and let it take you wherever it's going to take you, instead of trying to force things and force your homework in, I think is the way to go. The homework should be a given, and then you just cover the next game. But when CC's doing his thing on the mound and the game's on the line, you don't really need to say much. You just watch and react and get out of the way, because it's a beautiful game. And those who are tuned in, I think, even though they might not know why it sounds different, I think they'll appreciate just kind of the announcer not talking over all of it.
Amen. See, and Joe, you've also prepared CC to come be in the booth now, which I appreciate.
That's never going to happen.
Because,
come on, go have fun. Stick your chin out. You can do it.
He can. He would be great. He would be great. I'm working on it, but
just Raiders games. Just
Raiders games.
That's it.
I wouldn't be able to like stop my fanboyness, so I don't know if I can call any Raider game. So,
are you good with them traveling? Are you good with the Las Vegas Raiders?
As long as they don't change the name, I'm fine. Like, if they can go to the moon, if they the Raiders, I'm still gonna be with them. So,
all right, I got you.
And if they ever win, oh man, will that be like? That's gonna be a bigger win than me winning the World Series. I'm telling you.
I know. I can't even imagine.
And nobody can even imagine them ever winning the Super Bowl.
Hey, crazier things have happened.
Yeah, for sure.
Joe, thank you for all this time. We so appreciate it, man.
It was a blast. Thank you. I wish they were all this much fun. Nobody ever wants to hear those 6 words. Want to be on my podcast, but I was glad to say yes. So it's good to see your faces, and hopefully we'll figure this thing out in baseball, and I'll see you at a stadium at some point in 2022.
For sure. I see you in Tahoe.
Amen.
For sure.
Yes, definitely in Tahoe. All right, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.